What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the 28th feature film in the career of the great Ridley Scott. He's turning 86 in 6 days' time, and the fact that he's still cranking out historical epics about figures like Napoleon is nothing short of miraculous. The movie's got plenty of flaws, but just the fact that he's able to stage the Battle of Waterloo at this point in his career while running off to go shoot Gladiator 2 now that the strike's over, I find it just absolutely astonishing. And I'm probably about 4 days late in reviewing this movie, but I didn't get a chance to see it until last night. But I saw it with my family last night, and everybody pretty much had the same reaction. Like, hey, it's pretty cool. It was fun to see the Battle of Waterloo. It was fun to see the performances by Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby and their unique interpretations of the characters of Napoleon and Josephine. But I don't anticipate that this movie is going to be anybody's new favorite Ridley Scott movie. And speaking of which, 2 weeks ago, I posted a video where I ranked all 27 of the previous feature films by Ridley Scott. And so I kind of had no choice but to review this just so I can let people know where I think it kind of fits in with my overall design. And I would say it's about as far from the top as it is from the bottom. But I guess the more important question would be, how does it compare to his other historical epics? Like, should you rush out to the theater so that you can tell your grandchildren, I saw that on the big screen and it blew my mind? Or, yeah, I waited for it to come out on Apple TV Plus and it was perfectly fine. So if I were to just compare it to his other historical epics, I would say that I enjoyed Last Duel more, but that's just because I enjoy medieval combat much more than the Napoleonic Wars. I'm actually embarrassingly naive and ignorant about the Napoleonic Wars. My little brother, who's still in college, who's a history buff, I made him give me kind of like the breakdown of Napoleon's full career the day before we shot it. I was like, dude, I just need to know, like, what are the basics? What is the 101 on his career? What are the major highlights, just so I can have like some basic foundation? The only historical fact that I knew about Napoleon going into it was that he was kind of a kinky guy when it came to what he liked to get up to with Josephine. Apparently there's a letter where he told her, I'll be home in 3 days, stop bathing. I'll let the rest of y'all fill in the gaps with your own perverted imagination. In any event, I know a little bit more about the Napoleonic Wars now, but I like The Last Duel more. It's much better than Exodus, Gods and Kings, but that's not saying much. I think Exodus, Gods and Kings is easily one of the worst movies of Ridley Scott's career. I think it's better than Robin Hood, but not by much. Robin Hood's not even really like a historical epic. It's more of like a, just an adventure movie, but the way they approached it and employing so much of the Crusades, it felt more like a historical epic than your traditional kind of Robin Hood story. It's not as good as Kingdom of Heaven. I've only seen the director's cut roadshow version of Kingdom of Heaven, but when Kingdom of Heaven is really cooking with grease with that great, siege warfare at the end, it's better than Napoleon by a mile. It's nowhere close to as good as Gladiator. I probably enjoyed Napoleon more than 1492 Conquest of Paradise. However, what 1492 has that this movie does not are those bone-chilling sequences of the boats just cruising along the Atlantic with that just awe-inspiring music by Vangelis. Like the imagery and the music of that movie, like, the movie's got its ups and downs and it's kind of a mess, but when it's working, it really works well, and that's kind of prime Ridley Scott. And this movie is definitely not as good as The Duelist, which I think is one of Ridley Scott's finest films. And it takes place in the exact same period and setting, the Napoleonic Wars. So if you want to see Ridley Scott, firing on all cylinders with this same subject matter, watch The Duelist instead. But I think Napoleon is worth watching. I would argue that if you're a Ridley Scott fanatic or a Joaquin Phoenix fanatic, or you just love the topic, well, then you should form your own opinion. You should check it out, because I've seen so many different reactions online where it seems like some people just absolutely loathe and despise this movie. Some people think it's pretty cool. I know that the French really hate this movie, and Ridley Scott had some very funny, dismissive comments about their negative reaction to the film. He's like, oh, well, they don't even like themselves and blah, blah, blah. But I would argue that this movie is worth watching for 3 ingredients. You have that incredible battle on the snow, the Battle of Austerlitz, if I'm saying that correctly, where you've got 2 major armies that think they've got kind of Napoleon backed into a corner, and he's basically luring them into a trap, and it's just absolutely gruesome what he does. But yeah, dying to cannon fire while you're freezing to death and falling into water, it's no fun for anybody, but it's just like, it's chess on a grand scale. And what really does best is just showing the movement of the troops and kind of giving you the lay of the land and the geography so that you can understand, like, when the cavalry goes in or withdraws, or when the infantry charges or withdraws or retreats. Like, you can see what he's doing to lure his opponents into a trap. And then, revealing all the cannons that are just going to unleash hell. Speaking of which, from Gladiator, he really, I mean, he's a ton of experience at this point in doing this, and there are not a lot of filmmakers alive today that even know how to stage this kind of combat. So the Battle at Austerlitz was well worth watching. The Battle at Waterloo, I mean, goddamn, it was incredible. I think that's the best scene of the entire movie. And Rupert Everett is back as Wellington, and it was fascinating seeing these two generals, or emperor, or general in one case, emperor in another case, watching each other through their spyglasses, seeing what they're doing and like what commands they're giving, and they're so close, and just that was absolutely fascinating, because for people who don't know about the Battle of Waterloo, reinforcements are coming to support Wellington in a matter of hours. So Napoleon knows that if he can fight his two opponents separately, he'll destroy them, but together that he'll lose. In any case, everybody knows what happened at the Battle of Waterloo. And the last ingredient that I enjoyed the chemistry between Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby, where they just really sell you on the idea that they were completely, totally obsessed with one another, fixated on one another, and they played a lot of games, and they had their little kind of miniature betrayals and that sort of thing, but they just have this bizarrely intense and attached and kind of dysfunctional relationship. And Vanessa Kirby, she's just so goddamn game, and I feel like she's finally getting the recognition she deserves as just an incredibly talented and obviously stunningly beautiful actress. I loved her as one of the villains in the Mission Impossible flicks. I guess she was in the last 2 maybe, or the last 3. Anyway, she's popped up a couple times in the Mission Impossible franchise, and she's great. But this is much more her speed, and she definitely elevates the material because she at least sounds kind of dignified and aristocratic. Joaquin Phoenix, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with him, where I think he's one of the most talented actors of his generation, and every once in a while he'll give a performance that I just absolutely love. Like even like in the early days, like To Die For, he was incredible with Nicole Kidman. Obviously, he was great in Gladiator, which is why he got this role. I mean, he and Ridley have history. Or films like The Master for Paul Thomas Anderson. He's got so many interesting dimensions and so many kind of like he contains multitudes, as they say. He's got serious chops, but I can't fucking stand his kind of sleepy mumbling routine, which he seems to revert back to or kind of lean back on more and more frequently in recent years, and it just drives me crazy. I just want to say, like, get a shot of adrenaline in your butt, open your goddamn eyes, drink a cup of coffee, slap yourself across the face, and like wake up, like speak clearly, open your eyes. Like he's got so much intensity and charisma, and he's like, and it's just like, I don't know at what point somebody told him like, oh, you're absolutely genius when you do that, but it's just, I find it repetitive at best and just kind of boring at worst. And he does a lot of that in this movie. And sometimes it's cool when you see him kind of like observing the battlefield, and he's kind of quiet and subdued. I would say it's a good Joaquin Phoenix performance. And when he's, aroused by or just turned on by his wife and trying to produce an heir, it's absolutely hysterical seeing like what his ideas of lovemaking entail. And it's a lot of grunting and a lot of kind of brutish bestiality and that sort of thing. But it is hilarious. So I know he's still got all those chops and he's still got all that talent. I just wish somebody would tell him, speak clearly and let us understand the words that you are saying. But at least he didn't try to do a French accent. Like Ridley Scott avoided the pitfalls and the mistakes that he made with House of Gucci, where he had everybody from Jared Leto to Al Pacino to Jeremy Irons all doing Italian accents, and everybody was like, good God, man, like, no, like how, like that is like a crime against humanity what you did with that movie. Here, he just lets everybody use their own accents, whether they're from Russia or from Austria or whatever. Everybody speaks the way they want to speak. And there's one scene where they suddenly randomly just start speaking in a language where they're using subtitles. Like, everybody's just speaking English in their own accent. Just stay consistent. But so I guess this is all just a long-winded way of saying that I kind of like the idea of doing a movie of Napoleon much more than the finished product. I mean, David Scarpa, he's written a few scripts now for Ridley. I think he wrote All the Money in the World. He wrote this, and he's working on Gladiator 2. They seem to really enjoy working together. And it's a pretty by-the-numbers biopic where through like 6 or 7 major battles as like kind of providing the structure, you get to see the rise and the dominance and then the inevitable downfall of Napoleon across his entire career. And so they're not really trying to like reinvent the biopic or anything like that. But a lot of filmmakers over the years have tackled this topic. Famously, Abel Gance, back in the late 1920s, he was one of the early pioneers of widescreen cinematography, where they didn't have the widescreen format yet. And so he shot sequences with 3 cameras side by side. And so if you want to see the original silent film epic of Napoleon projected properly, you have to have 3 projectors showing it, and I've never had a chance to see it in that format. I would kill to see the original Napoleon projected that way, and I think it was supposed to be like the first of like 6 3-hour epics. I mean, Abel Gance, his ambition knew no limits. And then, of course, you've got the movies that tackle the Napoleonic Wars from a different point of view, like Master and Commander. It's not a Napoleon movie because Napoleon never shows up, but it is the Napoleonic Wars, the Duelists. It's not a Napoleon movie, but it is the Napoleonic Wars. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure does have Napoleon, but I wouldn't describe it as a Napoleon movie. Barry Lyndon feels Napoleonic because obviously Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a Napoleon, never got to. It's one of his famous unfinished, kind of unrealized projects. But at least Barry Lyndon is probably the heavyweight champion of capturing this kind of period and this kind of warlike environment. I mean, it's hard to think of a better example. However, there's one Napoleonic War movie which I've never seen, which apparently is astonishing. The 7-hour cut of War and Peace from 1965, directed by Sergei Bondarchuk, if I'm saying his last name even vaguely correctly. I've heard repeatedly from movie poster designer Tony Stella that is the version to see, or that is like the great Napoleon movie, but obviously it's from a different point of view from the Russians, who famously burned their own city of Moscow to the ground rather than letting Napoleon take it, as they retreated and just let the winner basically finish off the great majority of his troops. He got a little overextended. That Russian winter is nothing to fuck around with, but I do need to see that version of that movie. I saw the War and Peace adaptation from 1956 with Henry Fonda and Audrey Hepburn, but I'm ashamed to admit I've never read War and Peace. I've never read any Leo Tolstoy. I've read a few translations of Dostoevsky, of like Notes from Underground and Crime and Punishment, but yeah, Leo Tolstoy is one of my literary blind spots. So I don't know what is the definitive adaptation of War and Peace, but if you want to see the Napoleonic Wars from the other side's point of view, apparently the 1965 film is absolutely astonishing. And then, of course, we also have Danny DeVito as Napoleon in Get Shorty, and a lot of people were laughing about how the poster for Napoleon in the movie Get Shorty is almost identical to some of the posters that Apple cranked out, or maybe Sony cranked out, for the Joaquin Phoenix version of Napoleon. But this is one of those giant topics where I think as long as the moving image is being used to tell stories, people will periodically come back to the story of Napoleon, because figures like Alexander the Great, or Julius Caesar, or Napoleon, or whomever, anybody who enjoys great success on the battlefield in any era is going to obviously be interesting forever. People never get tired of these great figures, and so it wouldn't surprise me if in like 5 or 10 years somebody else tries to do a giant one. But it does make me sad and kind of depressed that we never got to see Stanley Kubrick's version of the material. And Stanley Kubrick is one of the idols, or one of the heroes of Ridley Scott. And people were asking him all these questions like, how does it feel to have made a movie on the topic that like your idol didn't get to do? And his answer was kind of non-committal, or maybe he didn't want to get into the weeds drawing too many comparisons between himself and Stanley Kubrick. But Stanley Kubrick, for a lot of filmmakers, is the best filmmaker, or at least their favorite filmmaker of the latter half of the 20th century. And I totally understand why. Like Steven Spielberg really looks up to him, and Christopher Nolan really looks up to him. Martin Scorsese really looks up to him. Ridley Scott really looks up. He's the director's director. He's one of the directors that frequently leaves his peers in a hushed state of awe when they see like how well he was able to tackle so many different genres. So all we can do is look at Stanley Kubrick's plans and imagine what might have been. But I do think it's cool that Apple is making repeated efforts on this front to do these big, giant, prestigious historical films. Like in a time where a lot of kind of popcorn franchises have gone awry or lost their way, it's cool seeing them doing movies like Killers of the Flower Moon. It's cool seeing them doing movies like Napoleon. And we have Argylle coming out in February, where Matthew Vaughn is switching gears from his Kingsman franchise and doing what looks like a really cool, exciting, original film. And if anybody out there can afford to do original films, it's Apple. It's a $3 trillion company. I heard today on the podcast The Town that if you take Netflix and all the other Hollywood studios and combine them, they don't equal even 1/3 the size of Apple. So the risks that Apple can afford to take are considerable. It's just a question of like, how interested are they in film and television? How long do they want to continue doing this? how successful does a movie need to be to justify its existence? I heard one person say that for Apple, if a movie can generate enough ticket sales just to cover their marketing costs, well, then they consider that a net positive, because in the end, what they really want is for people to spend more time on Apple TV Plus. So I'd be very curious to hear from Apple what number they regard as a successful box office return for Napoleon. But it looks like at a minimum, when all the numbers are tallied by Sunday, that it's going to do slightly better than a lot of people were anticipating ahead of time. So I don't know if you should go see this in the theater. Like my dad and I, we are the perfect aging male audience. Like we love dad movies, and so we had no choice but to go see this. But your mileage may vary depending upon how interested you are in the topic or in Ridley Scott's films. But like I said, Ridley Scott has made probably somewhere between like 13, 14, 15 movies that are better than this. But as long as Ridley Scott continues to be interested in making movies and stepping behind the camera and doing what he does, I will continue to watch. I don't care how old he gets. So I'll include a link to my giant Ridley. It's an 80-minute video that I made about his career. I'll include a link down in the description below. And if you're having trouble sleeping tonight, put it on and listen to me rant and rave about his entire career. But at this point, I'm a little weak and weary from flying today and traveling back home. And obviously, like everybody, I've been eating bad food and drinking alcohol and that sort of thing for the last couple of days. So I'm ready just to chill. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to get back to full speed on this channel. I'm seeing The Boy and the Heron, the new Hayao Miyazaki film, and I'll be doing a box office breakdown over the weekend. So a lot of videos are going to be coming out from this channel between now and Christmas. I think I have tickets for 9 movies between now and Christmas, including like Godzilla -1 and a bunch of other flicks. So if you like this channel, stay tuned. I'm going to be hurling a lot of videos your way in the very near future. But thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to everybody's comments in the comments below. But give me a shout on Twitter @Colbrax if you feel like talking more. But please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. But I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Hope everybody has a great weekend. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.